Imagine waking up one ordinary morning to a knock at your door. Not from a neighbor, not from a delivery, but from federal officers holding official documents with your name printed across the top. They are calm, polite, professional, but what they are handing you changes everything. Your U.S. citizenship is under review. Your right to stay in the country you have called home for decades is no longer guaranteed. Your job, your benefits, your children's future, all suddenly uncertain. And the reason is not something you did yesterday. It is something tied to paperwork, choices, or legal definitions made many years ago. For many Filipino families in America, this scenario may sound unthinkable. Citizenship has always felt permanent, like a finish line reached after years of sacrifice. But beginning in 2026, that sense of finality is quietly changing. Not through loud announcements or dramatic speeches, but through policy shifts, enforcement priorities, and administrative rules that most people will not notice until they are already affected. Welcome back to Discovering the Earth. Today's story is not about fear, it is about awareness. If you are Filipino, whether you are a U.S. citizen, a permanent resident, an overseas worker, or a parent planning for your family's future, this is a conversation you cannot afford to ignore. Because a quiet shift in U.S. immigration enforcement is making it easier than ever before to challenge, review, and in some cases revoke citizenship. And Filipino Americans sit at the center of this change. To understand why, we need to understand who Filipino Americans are in the United States. More than 4.4 million people of Filipino origin live in America today. Filipinos are among the most deeply integrated immigrant communities in the country. They serve as nurses, caregivers, engineers, teachers, soldiers, and small business owners. Hospitals, especially during the pandemic, could not function without Filipino nurses. Military service by Filipinos dates back more than a century. This community has built its life in the United States not quietly, but faithfully. There is one detail, however, that sets Filipino Americans apart from many other immigrant groups. Filipinos have one of the highest naturalization rates in the country. Roughly 3 out of 4 Philippine-born residents eventually become U.S. citizens. At the same time, Filipinos also have one of the highest rates of dual citizenship. Because Philippine law allows former citizens to reclaim their nationality, millions of Filipino Americans legally hold 2 passports. For decades, this was encouraged. It allowed families to care for aging parents, retire with dignity, own property, and maintain cultural ties without sacrificing life in America. For a long time, dual citizenship was seen as a bridge. In 2026, that bridge is quietly being re-examined. To grasp the seriousness of this moment, we must talk about denaturalization, the legal process of revoking U.S. citizenship. Historically, this was extremely rare. For most of modern American history, citizenship was revoked only in the most extreme cases: proven fraud, hidden criminal records, war crimes, or clear national security threats. From 2017 through 2024, the U.S. government filed fewer than 150 denaturalization cases nationwide. That is a tiny number in a country with more than 23 million naturalized citizens. But rarity does not mean impossibility, and more importantly, it does not mean permanence. Beginning in 2026, the philosophy around enforcement is shifting. Agencies are moving away from treating denaturalization as a last resort and toward viewing it as a regulatory tool. The language used internally has changed. The goals have changed. And when goals change, outcomes follow. One of the most important changes is the introduction of volume-driven enforcement. Immigration agencies are now being encouraged to review significantly more naturalization cases each year, particularly older files created before modern digital systems existed. These older cases are attractive targets because they were often handwritten, dependent on foreign documents, and processed under looser verification standards. In other words, they are easier to question decades later. For Filipino immigrants who naturalized in the 1980s, 1990s, or early 2000s, this matters deeply. Many applications relied on birth certificates issued years after birth, marriage records affected by annulments, or name spellings that changed over time. None of these were unusual. None were considered fraud. But under modern scrutiny, even small inconsistencies can raise flags. And once a file is flagged, the process becomes difficult to stop. Another critical shift lies in how misrepresentation is being interpreted. Traditionally, the government had to prove that a person knowingly lied and that the lie was material to obtaining citizenship. In practice, This offered protection to people who made honest mistakes. That protection is weakening. Investigators are now encouraged to examine patterns rather than intent. Omissions, incomplete answers, and discrepancies are being treated as potential indicators of deception, even when there is no evidence of malicious intent. This change hits Filipino families especially hard. Philippine civil documentation has long been affected by delayed registrations, lost records due to natural disasters, informal adoptions within extended families, and name variations across documents. Marital histories can be complicated by annulments that are legally valid in the Philippines but unfamiliar to U.S. systems. What was once accepted as cultural and administrative reality can now be reinterpreted as inconsistency. But the most sensitive issue, the one few officials openly discuss, is dual citizenship. While U.S. law does not explicitly prohibit holding another nationality, enforcement priorities increasingly favor exclusive allegiance. Dual citizenship is not illegal, but it is becoming politically uncomfortable. In investigations, dual citizens are more likely to be scrutinized. Foreign passport use, overseas voting, property ownership abroad, and continued family ties can all become points of inquiry. For Filipino Americans, this creates a painful dilemma. Many reclaimed Philippine citizenship not out of divided loyalty, but out of responsibility. To care for parents, to retire after decades of work, to maintain a sense of identity. Yet in the current climate, those same choices can draw unwanted attention. Compounding this is the speed at which cases now move. New enforcement models prioritize efficiency. Reviews happen faster. Appeals are narrower. Legal battles become more expensive. For many families, especially retirees, prolonged court fights are financially impossible. Once citizenship is revoked, consequences follow immediately. Voting rights disappear. Federal benefits stop. Legal status becomes uncertain. Families are placed under extraordinary stress, often with little time to respond. So why is all of this happening now? The answer surprises many people. This shift is not primarily about crime, it is not mainly about fraud, and it is not truly about loyalty. At its core, this is about control. Control over immigration numbers, political messaging, and long-term demographic influence. Filipino Americans are stable, law-abiding, economically independent, and deeply documented. That makes them visible, and visibility makes quiet enforcement easier. This does not mean mass denaturalization is inevitable. It does not mean every Filipino citizen is at risk. But it does mean that assumptions of safety are no longer enough. Old paperwork matters again. Silence is no longer protection. Families who believed their journey was complete may find themselves defending it once more. The most important thing now is preparation, not panic. Naturalized citizens should gather and review their records carefully. Errors should be addressed where legally possible. Assumptions that it no longer matters should be reconsidered. When in doubt, professional legal advice is not fear, it is foresight. For generations, Filipinos believed citizenship was the end of the road. In 2026, it becomes something else, a status that must be understood, protected, and respected anew, not with fear, but with awareness. The most dangerous changes are not the loud ones, they are the quiet ones. Thank you for watching Discovering the Earth. Stay informed, stay connected, and take care of one another.